Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Well, welcome to you all once again. This is really a particularly important webinar for us at the IPB. We've been having a wonderful time, I must say, despite the lockdown, because the online facilities of Zoom meetings and GoTo meetings and all the other kinds of online meetings have allowed our family, which is a lot of us keep on calling it the International Peace Bureau family, to feel very united in recent months. So despite the pandemic, or perhaps because of the pandemic, we have, over the past few months, felt closer than we ever have before. We always used to strive to have in-presence meetings and roundtables and conferences and discussions and council meetings, etc. And the participation was, of course, always rather reduced because traveling across the globe, even though it was possible, was never affordable for us all. But now we all managed to come together much more frequently. And so we're absolutely delighted. Now, naturally, the 6th to the 9th of August are extremely important dates for the history of the IPB and for its present and for its future. It's really been the backbone of the activity of disarmament. Our nuclear disarmament has always been the backbone of the disarmament activity in the IPB. So of course the 75th anniversary is especially important for us and for all of those who are here present and then some. I've noticed that there are millions and millions of meetings going on today, and none of us is going to be able to participate in all of them. But in any case, I'm delighted that you could all be here for hours. You've all seen the program. I am not going to present our speakers to you all at front. I will just introduce them one by one when it's their turn. And we're going to start with an old friend of the IPB, who is also, I think, an old friend of many of the organizations that are members of the IPB. He is a man whom we awarded our Sean Mcbride Prize to just a couple of years ago. He would not have been able to come had we been having a meeting in person because he doesn't travel that much anymore. But Noam Chomsky is our wonderful, wonderful dear friend and has recorded a video message for us all. And I think that is the perfect point from which to start. Sean, would you send that?
Well, August 6, 1945 is a day that is unforgettable to, or should be, to anyone alive at the time. I was a teenager, a counselor in a summer camp. It was announced in the morning that the atom bomb had been dropped on Hiroshima, city destroyed. Everyone listened and went off to their morning activity, baseball game, swimming, whatever it might be. I was so appalled, I couldn't believe it. Not only at the event, but that nobody cared. And to this day, I have never lost that feeling. I still have it. I can't imagine how people can not be utterly horrified at what happened and simply lacking concern over the fact that we are getting closer and closer to terminal nuclear war. Not my judgment. As everyone should know, the famous doomsday clock last January was, the analysts dropped minutes, moved to seconds, now 100 seconds to midnight. Since then, since January, we have been moving closer. President Trump had already abandoned the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, immediately following it with the testing of missiles that violate the treaty, basically saying to others, come on and join us in helping destroy the world. Since January, he's abandoned the Open Skies Treaty, which goes back to Eisenhower, which offered another limited protection against the threat of nuclear war. He's posed frivolous objections to the signing of the New START Treaty. The Russians have been pleading for negotiations about this for some time. It's due to be signed in a few months. It's probably too late to do anything. That's the last of the major. That's the end of the arms control regime. He's now threatening to start nuclear tests, violating the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, which actually the United States never ratified, but has observed. That's almost 30 years old. Again, encouraging others to do the same. Meanwhile, pouring money into the development of new and more destructive weapons. Others are doing it too, but this of course, stimulates others to do so. Arms manufacturers are euphoric. Huge new contracts coming in to develop new means to destroy everything. And they plan long range, so they're expecting later contracts to try to find ways to defend ourselves against the weapons that we are constructing, that others will construct. This is all part of the manufacturing system. It's part of the way to stimulate, to try to make it look as if we're in a recovery, which of course we're not, to advance electoral prospects. All of this goes on with no comment, virtually. You take a look at the campaign, nobody talks about it, maybe a word here and there. Even among left critics, it's very hard to hear anything. Meanwhile, provocative actions are taking place along the Russian border. Trump is sending major naval contingents to the South China Sea. The background is one of increasing provocation and development of massive means for destruction. Going back to August 6th, 1945, was clear to anyone with a brain functioning that human intelligence had reached the point where it would soon have the means to destroy everything. Hiroshima bomb was still limited. You could only destroy a single city with a bomb. But it was perfectly obvious that technological advances would soon lead to greater destructive capacity. That happened by 1953, when thermonuclear weapons were exploded. At that point, yes, human ingenuity had found the ways to essentially destroy life on Earth. And it gets worse after that. Anyone who's looked at the record of the nuclear age can only conclude that it's a virtual miracle that we've survived. Case after case where it came very close to launch of nuclear weapons, averted either mostly by accidental misinterpretation of signals. The automated signals fail all the time. Human intervention at the last moment. Sometimes reckless acts of leaders. It's almost miraculous, and miracles don't persist. We're perpetuating an age of destruction, virtually of organized human life. This is, I should say, one of two races to disaster. The other is failure to address appropriately the growing the threatening environmental catastrophe of global warming, and in the unique case of the United States, not only refusing to deal with it, but racing as quickly as possible toward the abyss. It's almost impossible to observe what's happening to human beings and think that this is a viable species. I just can't get over the amazement that nobody cares.
Oh.
It's unimaginable.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, was that the end of the video, Sean?
Yes, that's the end.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. I thought he was going to be speaking for longer than that. I was so taken up that I was dumbfounded and dumbstruck, and as I'm sure you all were, a pessimism that is cosmic. Noam, our dear friend Noam, has always been quite well known for this kind of pessimism. Unfortunately, his very, very, very dark and negative outlooks for the future have, unfortunately, often proved to be right, or at least to be more correct than some of our more optimistic visions of the future, especially right now, and especially coming from the United States. I would like to now introduce Mrs. Masako Wada, reminding her that we have actually met before, because we were both at the Vatican at the nuclear disarmament conference that was convened by the Pope in November 2017, which was a very exciting moment, I must say. It was extremely exciting. Mrs. Wada, Mrs. Masako Wada, is the Assistant Secretary General of Hidankyo, Nihon Hidankyo, which is the biggest federation, the Federation of Hibakusha. Nihon Hidankyo is, of course, a member of the International Peace Bureau, and in the past was also awarded the Sean Mcbride Prize, just like Noam Chomsky was, by the International Peace Bureau. And I have a little piece of great news, which is that we have agreed that today is going to be the day, actually it was yesterday, that we announced the Sean Mcbride Prize for this year, which the IPB is awarding. And it is not directly to Nihon Hidankyo, but it is awarded jointly to the Hibakusha signature appeal, which has collected over 10 million signatures, which will be delivered to Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, but it was promoted by Nihon Hidankyo and coordinated by Nihon Hidankyo. And, but the co-winner of the Sean Mcbride Prize for 2020 is Black Lives Matter, the organization in the United States that has energized the whole world in a heat of anti-racist activity. There's something rather interesting music going on in the background. I don't know if everybody else can hear it, but I can hear it. So, Mrs. Masako Wada, I would like you now to take the floor. Thank you. Wait a minute, we can't hear you, or at least I can't.
Yeah, I think there's a problem with the microphone.
I can't hear you.
I think those sounds that we're hearing, Lisa, I think it's like a distortion of the microphone. I'm not sure how we can fix that now.
Are you?
Is there a headset possibly? Something you plug in, or a microphone aside from the computer?
You think? You think these is everybody else hearing these noises that I hear, this sort of background metallic noise?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Maybe Masako, Wada, could you try just quickly exiting the call and entering again? Sometimes it's just a miscalculation of the microphone. Unfortunately, we can't hear anything you're saying.
May I suggest that this is quite complex? Would you like to leave us and join us again? And in the meantime, I can call upon Sarah to speak. Okay, is that okay by you, Mrs. Wada? Okay. So exit the entire call, the Zoom call, if you have somebody there who can help you do that. And Sarah, can you unmute yourself and I will introduce you. Again, Sarah is also from the IPB family. She's a member of the council, but she comes to the council of IPB through her very active role in CND, the glorious old CND. For those of us who have white hair, we're very sort of pleased at the fact that such a young Sarah we have here representing CND, because CND is something that goes back for decades for me. Sarah, then, would you like, I'm sorry, this is a bit sort of patched up together to make up for the difficulty, but here you go, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, no problem at all. And I'm not that young, by the way. I think the Zoom sort of connection is a bit misleading. But anyway, yes, I'm Sarah Meddy Jones. I'm a campaigner with the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, CND, which is, for people that are not aware, a UK-based organisation which has been campaigning against nuclear weapons since 1958. So I'd like to thank the IPB for arranging this event and inviting me to speak today. As has already been mentioned, all anti-nuclear campaigners will tell you this is an incredibly busy week in our calendar every year as we commemorate the hundreds and thousands of people killed in the most horrific way possible at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I'm sure most of us here today will be participating in many other events and actions this week, but I truly think it's important that it is a busy week and that it remains a busy week. We cannot let the collective memory of humanity forget what happened on those days, August the 6th and August the 9th, 1945. As the number of people who directly remember those bombings gets fewer and fewer every year, it's up to all of us to take up the baton and keep those memories alive. I studied history at university, and as part of that, we did cover the bombing of Hiroshima, but not as an event as of itself, not considering the impact on the people of Japan, but just as a political event that apparently ended the Second World War and started the Cold War. I didn't actually truly consider those affected until I got involved with anti-nuclear campaigning and was lucky enough to meet Hibakusha, as the survivors are known. This shouldn't be the norm in our education systems, because once you know the stories of those affected by the bomb, what actually happened that day, I'm not sure how anyone can be in favour of nuclear weapons. Take Shinichi, who was 3 years old on August the 6th, 1945. He loved nothing more than riding his bike, and on that morning, he was riding in front of his house when in a sudden flash, he and his bike were badly burned. He died that night. Or Koji, who was 12, and helping with building demolition work in the area when bomb went off. Koji was never found. His lunchbox from that day, the only thing returned to his family. For Shigeyoshi, he worked at an oil company in Hiroshima. He didn't come home that day either. Instead, his wife and son found a skeleton sitting in a chair in his office and identified him by his watch. Yes, these stories are gruesome, but that is what a nuclear bomb is. And there aren't just 3 of these stories, but 300,000. And if a nuclear war was fought today, the number of casualties would be even higher. For example, each one of Britain's 200 nuclear warheads are 8 times as powerful as the one dropped on Hiroshima. And that's just a drop in the ocean in the global number. Let's never forget that these are weapons of mass destruction, which by their very nature are designed to kill millions of innocent civilians. But for some reason, most people seem to have put aside in their brain how truly awful these weapons are and just accept that they exist and that our governments are spending billions of pounds maintaining them and building new ones. The UK, of course, is spending billions at the moment replacing Trident, our current system. But in the last few elections in the UK, the whole debate around nuclear weapon has been reduced to a sensationalist question of, would you press the button? With anyone expressing any hesitation about what such an act entails, shamefully condemned as someone prepared to sacrifice the safety of their country. But this is not a video game with a big red button. This is real life, literally life or death. Because it is 75 years since nuclear weapons were used in war, it has become far too easy to push them into the back of our minds and think of them as something abstract that will never be used, something we, the general public, don't need to worry about. But that would be a mistake. As was said in the opening video, the world is becoming a more dangerous place, with a new arms race taking place and international nuclear agreements being ripped up, all under our noses with minimum scrutiny and minimum debate. All of the 9 nuclear states are upgrading their nuclear arms. Outer space is being talked about in realistic terms as the next battlefield. Smaller, what is called more usable nukes, if such a thing could ever exist, have already been deployed. And if a treaty called New START is not renewed next February, it will be the first time in decades that the world will not have a single nuclear weapons control agreement in place. 13,000 nuclear weapons exist in the world right now, with 2,000 kept on high alert, ready to be fired at a moment's notice. Add to this the rise of populist leaders, heightened international tensions, conflict over resources such as land and water caused by climate change, and then throw in a global pandemic. And yes, maybe I agree with Noam Chomsky, it does start to look a bit grim. But, and I will bring some good news today, while 9 countries, that's 9, have nuclear weapons, 185 do not. While some governments, including the UK, seem intent on blocking progress towards a world without nuclear weapons, most of the world's countries came together in 2017 to adopt a new treaty at the UN, which would make nuclear weapons illegal in those countries that sign. The Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, the TPNW, is expected to enter into force in the next few months. But Daniel from ICAN is also speaking today, and I'm sure he will have a lot more to say about this. But the one thing I will say is that ICAN have run a truly wonderful campaign, getting cities across the world to support the TPNW instead of their governments who are shamefully taking a back seat. Paris has already signed, Washington has signed, and we're doing our best here in the UK to get London on that list. In the meantime, C&D is encouraging all our supporters to get involved at the local level of government and politics. We're encouraging all our supporters to try and get their local council, even their local councillor, their local faith leader, anyone who wants to show support for this treaty. The more grassroots support this treaty has, the more chance we have of the nuclear-armed governments taking it seriously. Now, that campaign is one way that individuals can contribute to the overall goal of a world without nuclear weapons. What else can we do? We can keep in touch with fellow campaigners across the world. I find that international solidarity can be a hugely inspiring thing. There is so much to learn from each other and so much support we can give each other. The coronavirus pandemic has caused great disruption to people across the world, including campaigns such as ours. I'm really starting to miss now getting up early on a Saturday morning to go and trample through a muddy track outside a nuclear weapons base. Who knew? But the increasing amount of campaigning happening online also offers us opportunities to connect with more and new people. Since the start of lockdown, C&D has been arranging weekly webinars, connecting with hundreds of people, many new to the campaign. Let us not waste this opportunity and keep on thinking of creative ways to get people involved in our work. Being adaptable is essential if we are to reach our aims. As we have seen across the world in the past few years, things can and do change very quickly. We need to be ready for these changes. The threat of nuclear war is higher than it has been in years, and it is up to us to highlight the dangers. We cannot forget the horrors of what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The prospect of a nuclear war needs to be taboo before it is too late. There is a danger that one day misunderstanding, miscalculation, or just a mistake could lead to the use of nuclear weapons. The only way to avoid that is to get rid of them completely. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. That was an excellent example of how we campaign, how the grassroots campaign. You know, I live in Italy, but I felt absolutely perfectly represented in our campaigns, in our work, in our struggles with what you described for the UK. And I think more and more all our countries are becoming similar. We're sharing our experiences so effectively that we're all targeting our mayors, targeting our councillors, our faith groups, our associations, our NGOs. It's fantastic. I'm full of optimism yet again after Noam. Let's see if Mrs. Masako Wada can now speak into her microphone. Would you like to try?
Ms. Masako Wada, do you have headphones, perhaps, that you could try using? No? Okay. Unfortunately, the problem is persisting. Lisa, can you unmute yourself?
Sorry, I just said, do you have any wonderful suggestions, Sean? You almost always manage to solve all of our problems. See what you can do this time.
Well, it will be tough without a headset, and if we have Emiko Hirano suggests that she could try to restart her computer completely, and perhaps that could fix it. You know, there are also the audio settings. She could go through and see if there is anything in there that might help.
Emiko, are you in the same office with Mrs. Wada?
It appears she's on the phone with her right now. I see that she has a phone up to her ear, so maybe between them they can figure that out.
Okay. Well, in that case, we move on to Daniel, don't we? Is that okay by you, Daniel?
Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
Let me say a couple of words about Daniel. In the past few years, I've done a lot with Daniel. We've spent a lot of time together. Daniel's come to Italy several times, and we've met in Geneva, in Paris, various ICAN organizations. I don't think there's any need for me to say that ICAN, as a coalition, which IPB has been a member of since the outset, I don't think there's any need for me to add the fact that ICAN has been one of the most exciting events, innovations, developments that we've had in recent years, and that the excitement of the Nobel Peace Prize was shared by all of us. I was in Oslo and just as enthusiastic as everybody else. Thank you so much, Daniel and Beatrice and Susie and all our ICAN friends, for what you have helped us all achieve. You've spurred us on. You've been fantastic. So I think now we can counterbalance our Chomsky pessimism with a bit of ICAN optimism, can't we? Well, Daniel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Can you all hear me, by the way? Is that, yeah? Well, Lisa, I noticed that you didn't give me the same kind of introduction as a young person here, so I take that I've moved on to the other side here. So old Daniel is on the phone here. Well, I'll take that in stride, I suppose. But no, thank you very much for that generous introduction, very kind. And first, I just want to acknowledge the Sean Mcbride Award, obviously a very famous award. And it's fantastic to hear that it was awarded to the BLM movement and to the Hibakusha appeal campaign. I think it goes without saying that those are both very worthy and also timely winners. So congratulations to the winners, and also great appreciation to IPB for hosting that award. Yeah, I do want to say as well, I'm looking forward to hearing from Masako Wada afterwards. I think her views are really what, as Lisa, as you said at the outset, her views are really what kind of the views of her and the Hibakusha are really what guide us through this work that we do, and in addition to providing us with inspiration, provides us with a lot of motivation to keep going on an issue that's as difficult and sometimes as challenging as Professor Chomsky put it very well as it is. But and I also want to acknowledge Sarah. Really appreciated her talk and for sharing some of the stories of the horrific impact, the individual stories that she mentioned, and also appreciated her, the concrete suggestions for how people can take action. That's often something that we as activists get asked quite a lot, and it's often quite hard to get that across to people. What can people, the public, people who aren't already in the campaign, or do? And I think Sarah outlined some of those quite well. The 75th anniversary has to be the catalyst to end the nuclear scourge. We have the momentum right now. We have the legal framework to do so in the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. The Hibakusha have carried the terror of nuclear war for 75 years and shared their story even as many tried to silence them, and also when it was personally quite difficult or risky to do so from a social stigma perspective. And I can only imagine that it's not easy for them to tell these stories and to have done so for so long, especially now around the 75th anniversary and all the attention that it's getting, in order that the broader public be able to comprehend nuclear weapons in concrete human terms rather than abstract security-centric terms. We do ask Hibakusha to, in a way, relive this trauma so that we can be better activists. So they're sacrificing for us, I think, and we have to do our best to respect that and to make the most of it. So we have to listen to them and compel others to remember what happened on August 6th in Hiroshima and August 9th in Nagasaki. But we also have to honor them by taking action. Our thanks and our appreciation is not really enough. We have to rise to their legacy by taking action in support of their calls for abolition. And as the Hibakusha appeal notes, we have to call for nations to join the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and use it as a platform to motivate action that will eliminate nuclear weapons. And that's I think why it's a bit frustrating, if I could share some of Chomsky's pessimism for a moment before I get into the optimism, Lisa, I promise. But it's frustrating to see the way in which the media chooses to report this story. I'm sure many of you have seen the articles that have come up over the last few days, which talk about the destruction that was wrought upon Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the horror of the ground. But how many of them actually, maybe they have interviews with Hibakusha sometimes, but how many actually go further to actually report what the Hibakusha are actually calling for? In addition to explaining their trauma, how many of these articles actually say what they go, what they want? I think it's precious few. The nuclear armed states have been, in some ways, been trying to silence the Hibakusha and their message for the last 75 years because they know the power of their testimony about the humanitarian impacts. They're also trying to prevent states from joining the TPNW. I mean, through our efforts to encourage states to join the treaty, and we speak a lot with diplomats from different countries from all parts of the globe, we often hear stories of interference and pressure from certain nuclear weapon states who are looking to stop states from joining the treaty altogether, or even to encourage them to delay joining as a means of slowing the momentum. So it's really kind of nefarious tactics that are being employed there to kill the momentum. as Sarah pointed out, very well, and I won't repeat what she says, the nuclear arms states are wasting, and Noam Chomsky mentioned this as well, nuclear arms states are wasting billions of dollars on nuclear weapons at the same time as they're unraveling arms control agreements. They're envisioning new uses and new types of nuclear weapons, and they're even encouraging each other. As The Guardian reported the other day, I think it was an article by Julian Borger, the UK has been lobbying US Congress to support a new type of warhead that could be used on Trident missiles. As Professor Chomsky also said, and I noted that arms manufacturers are euphoric right now. The COVID-19 crisis and the failures of government response bring into sharp focus just how irresponsible this is. Many of you will have seen by now the numbers that have been collected around nuclear weapon spending, juxtaposed with the healthcare spending that could have been crucial at this time. I'm just going to run through some of those numbers for you, and I apologize if you've already seen them several times before. So last year, 2019, the US spent $35.1 billion on nuclear weapons, which is equivalent to 300,000 beds in intensive care units, 35,000 ventilators, the salaries for 75,000 US doctors and 150,000 nurses. In France, they spend they spend on average $6.7 billion per year, which is equivalent to 100,000 hospital beds in intensive care units, 10,000 ventilators, the salaries of 15,000 French doctors and 50,000 nurses. And the UK, 7.2 billion they spent in 2019, 100,000 hospital beds, 30,000 ventilators, and the salaries of 50,000 British nurses and 40,000 doctors. So what I'm getting at here is the hope for any hope of looking to the nuclear weapon states for good faith efforts to disarm, as the last 20 years, or so have shown, it's futile. Like any historian of social justice movements would tell you, those in a position of power, and I hesitate to use the word power with regards to nuclear weapons because we're trying to get away from that kind of language, but let's say the power that they perceive, they will never voluntarily give up that position of power. They have to be compelled to do so. And that's why the TPNW is so important. And we're not expecting the nuclear weapon states to sign the TPNW anytime soon, and we're not, concerned about that. That doesn't mean it's any less meaningful. It is important to note that the TPNW does envision how to deal with that scenario. But what we are expecting and what we're already seeing is the creation of a new norm of illegality and a new stigma around nuclear weapons, which through the efforts of civil society, like all of us here, through supportive governments, through changing media narrative, through the support of financial institutions who are increasingly refusing to fund this new nuclear arms race, through the collective support of cities and towns and municipalities that Sarah alluded to, and committed parliamentarians in nuclear umbrella states, which many of you are working with, will begin to topple this group of states, like dominoes that are resistant to changing the status quo. And I include my own country, Sweden, in that group. Not a NATO state, not an umbrella state, but still a state that is contributing to this notion, this spurious notion that nuclear weapons are in some way provide security. It'll start in some ways with getting to 50, but I have to emphasize that 50 ratifications for the treaty, I should say. But I have to emphasize that this is just a beginning. The work will continue and it will need to accelerate on our part. And so to provide some, some good news, and I think, barring something unforeseen, what I can share is we're expecting 2 new ratifications tomorrow from 2 states that have been champions for the humanitarian initiative all along. Not at liberty by their request to disclose who they are at the moment, but I think those of you who have followed the process quite closely can probably make an educated guess. So that's very exciting. And if you follow ICAN on social media, you'll be able to find the link to follow the ceremony that will take place tomorrow at 9:30 New York time. So just in conclusion, Professor Chomsky outlined, the dire situation that we're in right now. But I think for those of us, in this call and those of us in the community, we're actually quite, optimistic about the path forward. We have the tools available to us. We have a new generation of campaigners that are energized and working on this. And we have, I think, what I actually take a lot of confidence in is this kind of pressure from the nuclear weapon states on these other states to get this. It shows that they are scared of this treaty. They're scared of the progress that we're making. They're scared of the humanitarian narrative. So I think that's kind of what gives me motivation and energy to move forward. So thank you very much. I'm sorry if I went a little bit over time, Lisa. I hope you'll forgive me, but thanks so much.
Daniel, I will of course forgive you. You forgive me for not calling you young. I think it's because we've been doing so much together over the past few years that I just have trouble thinking of you as being young anymore. Wow. You're so well established. And
I'm not young. I've got more gray hair than anyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. That was great. That really was exactly what I was hoping from you. Energizing, and looking forward to the 2 new ratifying states tomorrow. I have an educated guess, which I think I can is fairly reliable, and absolutely wonderful the way you are so rational. You may be young, but you're rational. You work it all out carefully, pen and paper, and you've worked it all out, and it's all legally accurate. It's fantastic. Thank you so much. Nobel Peace Prize, well deserved. I wonder whether Mrs. Wada now has solved the microphone problems.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry for taking time. Thank you. Yeah. I'd like to express my gratitude for the opportunity to speak on the 75th anniversary of the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Thank you very much. I was born in Nagasaki in 1943, so I'm one of the youngest Hibakusha. I was 1 year and 10 months old when the bomb was detonated over my city. I was too young to remember what happened. I don't think I can talk about the indescribable events that other elder Hibakusha went through, but I was there with my mother and my grandfather. My house was 2.9 kilometers, 1.8 miles from the blast center. Thanks to the mountains, which somewhat shielded my house from the direct impact of the bomb, I'm still here. My mother used to tell me her story many times. My mother's atomic bomb experience. With the bomb explosion, the window panes, shoji paper screens, lattice doors, and clay walls had all crumbled into pieces by the blast. A pile of mud and dust over 1 foot thick was left on the floor. She saw an astonishing scene on the brown mountainside, a long black line moving downwards. It looked like a march of ants. They were burned and wounded people trying to escape the fires near the epicenter by coming over the mountain. They were almost naked, their hair stuck together with blood like horns. Many people might have died along the way. Numerous maggots as big as your thumb were swarming on the burns and wounded of the victims, who were laid all over the floor of the college auditorium. Her job was to brush off the maggots from their body with glue. She was 24 years old. There was an empty lot next to our house because of building evacuation. In that empty lot, the dead were cremated from morning till night every day. The stench made her totally lose her appetite. Human remains packed into box-shaped garbage carts were continuously brought there. The workers collecting bodies from the street just held them by the limbs and threw them into the cart. Their hideously burned hands and feet stuck out as if they were dolls. People talked about the dead as if they were an everyday sight, saying, there are lots today, or there aren't so many today. Everybody became numb to what was happening. What is human dignity? Should human beings be treated like that? We are not created to be burned like garbage. This is just a little part of the account that I heard repeatedly from my mother. She passed away 9 years ago at the age of 89. She suffered from stomach cancer, liver cancer, and various other diseases, and had been hospitalized on and off 28 times. She seemed very unsatisfied when she read the account once I had recorded. The words couldn't capture her experience of hell on earth. I assume that other Hibakusha would feel the same. I always feel hesitant to share my mother's experience with other people. As I know, I can never fully describe what really happened. But now that 75 years have passed, the average age of the survivors is 83. And we younger Hibakusha must continue their work and speak out on their behalf. By the end of 1945, almost 140,000 people in Hiroshima and 70,000 people in Nagasaki had died as a result of the bombings. Most of them were civilians, including elderly people, women, and children. Many had been killed instantly without knowing what had happened. Those who were under the mushroom cloud, irrespective of their race, nationality, age, or sex, either died or were forced to live as Hibakusha. The deep suffering of those who barely survived continues to this day. Many of them suffered from burns and other injuries, as well as the after effects of radiation. Then there was a loss of loved ones, survivors' guilt, the scenes, sounds, and smells of the day burned into their memories, diseases of an unknown cause, economic hardship, discrimination in society due to misinformation about radiation exposure, and many broken dreams. In addition, the Hibakusha originally from China and the Korean Peninsula suffered from racial discrimination. The government did nothing to help them, but simply ignored and abandoned them. With wounds on their bodies and in their minds, the Hibakusha desperately struggled to live on while being forced to keep their mouths shut. Our organization, Nihon Hidankyo, was founded in 1956, 11 years after the atomic bombings. In a proclamation called Message to the World, adopted at the first meeting, the Hibakusha declared, "Thus we have reassured our will to save humanity from its crisis through the lesson learned from our experiences, while at the same time saving ourselves." And for 64 years since then, we have lived and worked tirelessly according to this commitment, so that no one else in the world will ever go through the same suffering that we experienced. It has now been 50 years since the NPT entered into force. Article 6 of the NPT stipulates that the state parties should pursue negotiation in good faith for nuclear disarmament. We must ask if the nuclear armed states have really pursued these obligations in good faith. In July 7, 2017, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons were adopted at the UN conference. Hibakusha were overjoyed, thinking that our survival had been rewarded. A heavy and rusty door seemed to be opening, and we were finally seeing a ray of light illuminating a path to achieving our goal. But in order for the TPNW to come into effect, the ratification of 50 nations is needed. So far, only 40 nations have done so. I sincerely ask each one of you today, as members of civil society, as human beings with dignity, and as peacemakers, to raise your voice from Berlin for the abolition of nuclear weapons. There are those who created the atomic bombs, and those who used them, and there are also those who were pleased by their destructive power and consequences. These people are absolutely unpardonable, but we Hibakusha have never wished to take vengeance on them. We know that if a nuclear weapon is to be used for the third time, there would be no one who would survive and rejoice about its devastation. In an atomic desert where nothing is left, who can be proud of the might of national power, status, or prestige? Nuclear weapons which continue to be created on the pretext of deterrence and not for actual use are nothing but a negative human legacy. Power dictated by nuclear weapons is not justice. Whether we can actually open the door more widely depends on the decision of governments, as well as the action of citizens urging decisions by their governments. And what is required of us is to disarm our hearts, pray, hold dialogues with people, and take action together. We Hibakusha pledge to use our remaining strength to work together with you. I was there 70 years ago, and I'm still here to tell you our ardent and sincere desire of all the Hibakusha. Thank you very much for your listening.
Thank you so much. I am very moved indeed. All those things that you talked about from the point of view of the Hibakusha is what gives us the emotions and the strength to carry forward our campaigns. You know, in Nagasaki, when the Pope was there last November, he said, I think, one of the most fascinating things about nuclear deterrence that has guided me ever since. He says deterrence is immoral because it is the threat of use, and the world cannot build peace, future, development, positive relations between states and peoples, cannot build that if there is this continuous threat of destruction. Therefore, the threat of destruction posed by the policy of nuclear deterrence is immoral and therefore must be totally illegal. I thought that was pretty good stuff. Thank you very much. I'm glad we managed to solve our microphone problems. We now have Owen Tudor, who's with us, And the ITUC, he is Deputy Secretary General of the ITUC, I see from my notes, and I'm delighted to have him here. And we have worked so closely with the trade unions in our countries. We in Italy have worked very closely for a long time, but also internationally. And the ITUC has always supported the ICAN campaigns. And more recently, thanks to my new co-president, Philip Jennings, we have, the IPB has its sort of privileged contacts with the ITUC. And we're delighted to be collaborating now on the issue of nuclear disarmament, but also on other issues as well. Owen.
Well, grazie mille, Lisa. It's a bit difficult following Masako in that way. No matter how many times I hear it, it's always intensely moving to receive the testimony of the survivors. And all I think we can do in response is pledge in honor of the Hibakusha and also to honor the memory of the dead, is to commit ourselves once again to fight for the living and to rid the world of nuclear weapons. And whilst I'm on that, the subject of death, commiserations to those who knew the former Sean Mcbride Prize winner from 1998, John Hume, who died this week. So on this day of you letting us into the secret of this year's winner, commiserations to those who knew John Hume as well. The International Trade Union Confederation represents 200 million union members in 164 countries and territories around the world. Our starting point, obviously, is never again. No to nuclear war, which would be an extinction event for our species. And this week's 75th anniversary of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki is a somber reminder of the appalling destructive power of nuclear weapons and should spur international efforts to eliminate them. With rising global tensions and the retreat by many governments from international negotiations and multilateral solutions, the risks of nuclear conflict are very real. This sad anniversary must give impetus to getting nuclear weapons countries around the table to bring an end to the possibility of a nuclear holocaust by decommissioning existing arsenals and stopping the production of new nuclear weapons. Our Japanese trade union colleagues in Rengo have led and continue to lead the global union movement's work on nuclear weapons, as they, like the Hibakusha, know the effect. Just as you're guided by them, we're guided by our colleagues in Japan. But as well as the obvious risks to life and human life generally, which others have covered, organizations of people at work have other reasons to want nuclear weapons and the nuclear arms race abandoned. In addition to the risk of annihilation, the sheer cost to maintain these arsenals is unacceptable. The money spent on them should be put to socially and economically useful purposes, including conversion of facilities to peaceful purposes. The peace dividend we were promised at the fall of the Berlin Wall has never been delivered. And the trillions now spent on nuclear weaponry and military expenditure, as David gave us the figures, must be diverted to spending on health and education, not least to deliver the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And they must also be diverted to just transition, ensuring that working people in the industry are not forced to choose between the nuclear arms race and putting food on their families' tables. The failure to realize the peace dividend 30 years ago is just one reason why working people are skeptical and need to be convinced. They and others, especially in conflict or potential conflict zones, also need to be convinced that other ways can be found to deliver security. Of course, we know that nuclear weapons offer the very antithesis of that security. But unions in Europe and elsewhere represent people in countries on both sides of the possible battle lines, So we understand people's fears and how those fears are exploited by politicians wedded to the threat of nuclear apocalypse. Trade unions, in our very essence, are about resolving conflict by collective bargaining, not war, by peaceful negotiations, not battlefields. The world simply must be rid of weapons of mass destruction for security today and for future generations. That's why support for the Non-Proliferation Treaty is so important, and why all countries should ratify the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. We welcome the UN Secretary General's statement calling for the elimination of nuclear weapons, and we join you in saying, never again, not now, not ever. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Owen. Very, very important words there. Yes, never again. No more Hiroshima, no more Nagasaki. What's happening these days, as well as many different Zoom meetings, go-to meetings, and meetings of different kinds online, and the big Japanese conferences that are going on multiple days, the IPB has produced a statement together with IPPNW, another Nobel Peace Laureate, but also together with ICAN, we have promoted a video called The Vow from Hiroshima, which will be possible to be seen free of charge on the 9th of August, as far as I understand. And I think that's very important on the 9th of August. But also these days, Mary Becker, who is a film producer who produced what I found was a wonderful, I mean, a very interesting and thought-provoking film 15 years ago, called Original Child Bomb. It was a wonderful film. It was based on Thomas Merton's poem called The Original Child Bomb. And she made this fantastic film, and I think it was 2004 actually, and she has now done a re-edited digitalized version, and it's visible on YouTube. If you look up Original Child Bomb, Mary Becker, completely free of charge over the 75th anniversary days. I strongly recommend you to watch it. She has done an incredible work of research, digging out footage from pre-Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing days of Japanese everyday scenes and so on. It's an excellent film that you should all watch. We have some time now for questions and answers. I don't know quite, Sean's given you the instructions as to how you raise your hand, but you can also do it, you know, like arts and crafts, homemade way, by waving at me, and I will give you the floor. Is that you, Rainer? Are you waving, Rainer? No, he's not. Oh, okay. Anyone else want to?
You know, I'm raising my hand, but I don't want to be the first. When there's someone else, he or she should start.
I don't think there is.
Okay.
Everybody's a bit shy today. Go ahead, Rainer. Go ahead.
This is because of the day. I can imagine that we all are a little bit shy when we remember the August 6th. You know, I want to use the chance to announce that on August 9th and August 10th, the ITUC, IPB, and other organizations, including Pax Christi Church and Peace, will come out with a new European campaign against European nuclear weapons. We want to restart a long-term campaign for getting Europe free of nuclear weapons. It is not a campaign for 4 or 6 weeks. It should be a long-term campaign. On one side, we want to abolish the US nuclear weapons in the different countries in Europe, and we are starting discussing about a common event next year in front of the different military bases, but also where we want to discuss much more in detail, much more intensive, the British and the French nuclear weapons. I'm very happy that CND and Mouvement de la Paix, the big peace movement in the countries are supporting our appeal. So when you are looking to the new website after August 9th, you will see the new campaign against European nuclear weapons.
Thank you, Rainer. I think that's very important. And for those of us who are no longer as young as Daniel and Sarah, we will be reminded of things, of campaigns we carried out in the 1980s. And in the 1980s, we were a little bit more successful, and we're still looking back to those successful days. It's extremely important, I think, if we can launch once again nuclear disarmament as a European backbone for our peace struggles. It could really be the pillar on which we hang all our actions in Europe. I think we need something very strongly to unite the different campaigns in Europe. And I hope that this appeal, which will be launched on Sunday by the ITUC and the IPB and lots of other European-based organizations, will help us. Anybody else on this? Philip, you don't usually have to be begged to say something?
Okay, thank you, Lisa. I'd like to thank everybody for their wonderful contributions. I have three, not questions, but observations to make. An observation with remarks intended to Noam Chomsky, to remember the words of the late Congressman and civil rights fighter John Lewis, and also a message to all the people of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now, my observation to Noam is, we have to amaze you, Noam. You expressed amazement that the world is kind of fallen asleep, that they're not awake. As Sarah said, that people's brains aren't alive to what the realities are of what of the new threats, this new era of nuclear weapon danger. And I think, therefore, we have a duty at this stage in Noam's life that we can amaze him once again, that over these next days that we can reach out to those people that were prepared to take a stand for a new Green Deal, for a new environmental policy, that this millions of Greta Thunbergs around the world can also say, Noam Chomsky, we are standing for a better world in terms of its environment and a world free of nuclear weapons. Now, the spirit of John Lewis is important. He passed away last week, civil rights campaigner. He crossed that Petrus Bridge in Salem all those years ago, and he had a couple of messages to make to us and to everybody concerned. Speak up and stand up. And he also said, in my life, I've made good trouble. So what we have to do, and taking the message from Danielle and from Sarah and from Owen, we have to make good trouble. Now, I know we're already troublesome with what we are, what we stand for and what we say, and we are gaslighted, we are considered naive, but we're talking about real stuff here, that we're going to make good trouble with the nuclear nine. We're going to rattle their cages, stigmatize their policies, wake up politicians to make them think again. We have a duty to Noam to amaze him, and we can do it in the spirit of good trouble of John Lewis. And we are really eager to hear of these two new ratifications tomorrow, and to get the message from young Danielle of the energy that is out there and the awakening that we can bring to people. Finally, to our friends in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, I am a Nagasaki Bugyo Masako. I know that this has quite an esoteric meaning that goes back to the times when Nagasaki was the only gateway to the world, to Japan of that time. And I was pleased to receive this kind of appointment, which I know is not serious. It doesn't require a diplomatic decision of the Prime Minister of the country. But I take it seriously that the message that you were once the gateway to the world, and now you are the voice of the world, and that we owe a responsibility to you, that for this generation that is aging and passing away, that this message stays alive. I've been to the high school in Nagasaki. I've spoken to the history teacher that had this very basic idea. How can we rekindle the idea of and sensitize the generation, the young generation of Nagasaki in particular? A history class in a high school in Nagasaki had this idea that they would become peace messengers, and now it is something which is taken on a global amplification. So we have to speak up. We have to make good trouble about the dangers. We have to make good trouble in Europe. We have to make good trouble with politicians. We have to make good trouble with all the people that invest in nuclear weapons. And we have to make good trouble with all our friends and allies, that they in turn have to make good trouble to agitate and to mobilize and to organize for a nuclear weapon-free world. It's important that we stand together, that we're stronger together. I know the IPB has its World Congress in Barcelona next year. We've given all the data to the people, you know, and we have to become this hive of energy, of initiative and ideas. I know there's this term Build Back Better, which I know the CND now is talking about and other peace movements are talking about. We cannot allow that in the response to COVID-19, which has so fundamentally changed the way that we relate to one another. And I'm a victim of COVID-19. I have a sense of responsibility that there was I that was tested positive for this disease without knowing that I had this disease. I had the sword of Damocles over my head, the worry that I had. Who had I spoken to? Who had I mixed with? Had I accidentally or inadvertently passed this thing on? This is a time of collective solidarity. I had the sword of Damocles over my head, worrying about the doubts of what happens next. We've seen so many losses of lives, and now we have this sword of Damocles of nuclear weapons. It is a time of collective solidarity. It is a time where there has to be an identifiable, politically organized response to COVID-19. We cannot allow the response that comes to COVID-19 be in ignorance of nuclear weapons, about what they cost, about the money that we spend on the military. This should infuse, this should fire people up, and this should give us the basis to make good trouble, Danielle, for a long time to come, until that day arrives when this world is rid of nuclear weapons and we can all breathe a sigh of relief once again that humanity has spoken, that civilization has spoken and said that another world is possible. Thank you.
Oh, there's my microphone. Brilliant. Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Philip, for energizing us. I think that unless somebody now has, I have a few little things I want to say to just to wrap up.
Hand up.
Sean, there's a hand up. Who's
yes,
that?
We have Julia Optenbrinke has her hand up.
Julia, okay, up to you.
Hi, I just have a quick question since we're all super energized now. Can you hear me? Does it work?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I was just wondering, with the MPT review conference having been postponed and it's being relatively open if it's actually happening in January, I was just wondering what the different organizations were doing strategically to be working on kind of to further legislature on nuclear weapons prohibition. I mean, I know what ICAN is doing, but I was just wondering what kind of the long-term strategy was if also like a meeting in January actually is not going to be possible to push this forward. So if anyone has something to share on that, that would be highly appreciated.
Rainer, do you want, I think for the IPB, perhaps I could ask Rainer to quickly respond to that. Rainer?
You know, IPB is preparing their activities to the NPT conference, even when the NPT conference will only be online. There will definitely be a gathering of the ambassadors of the UN countries in January, because they have to discuss how they deal the whole process. Because when the meeting will not be in January, it is very difficult to have the meeting next year, and they have to discuss about the procedure. And in the discussion is that they will have in the year 2022 a bigger meeting in Vienna for discussing the procedure for the next 5 years. We are together with our US colleagues and friends, are preparing again a bigger public event in New York when the NPT conference will happen. It should be also a little bit a strategic meeting discussing what we are doing after the ban treaty is in power. We all hope that we have 50 ratified countries, up to them, how we can enlarge the support for the ban treaty, above all in the NATO countries, and hopefully get a lot of more countries supporting it, overcoming the problems which we have in some countries like Switzerland and Sweden. And also, we want to discuss about the next steps that we are doing in favor of the European campaign, and definitely want to have an intensive discussion with our US friend about hopefully the new situation after the US elections and what consequences have the US elections for our work. And that are our ideas. When the NPT conference happens, we will definitely be arranged a lot of side events during the NPT conference. And when it will be not happen, I think we need an international online exchange of all the activists on the nuclear weapons field discussing our activities for the next years.
Thank you, Rainer. Thank you, Rainer. Satisfied, Julia? For now, I think this is quite a good answer from Rainer. I think that we can add to all of that we don't know yet exactly what January is going to bring to us.
It's after my birthday, so I don't know nothing.
Okay. You're going to be on holiday again, aren't you, Rainer?
Definitely.
Yeah. So I think on that note, unless there are other very urgent questions, I think we can take...
two other hands up.
Oh, okay. I don't know who they are.
Philip did manage to energize people.
Yeah. I don't know who they are, though.
So
you have to tell me.
We have Ikra Riaz has her hand up first, and then Daniel Högsta has his as well.
Okay. Ikra Riaz first, and then Daniel. I'm going to have to leave you on the dot of 13:30, though. Ikra? I'm sorry, I can't hear you. I can't hear you, Ikra. Are you talking?
Hello?
Ikra, there you are. Okay. Yes.
I'm hearable or not?
No, we can't hear you again. Daniel?
Hello?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yes. We can hear you
Hello,
for
everyone.
a second and then you disappear. So please try again.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ikra Riaz from Pakistan.
Yes.
I'm a new member of IPB, and I want to learn about what we are working and why we are concerned towards positive peace. And today I want to talk about the positive peace and negative peace. As many of people know that there are two types of peace, but usually we focused on peace, but we are unable to understand that what is positive peace and what is negative peace. So I want to make
I don't know if anyone else can hear or I can't hear you.
Yeah, unfortunately, Ikra, you're cutting out and we don't have too much time left in this webinar. But if you'd like to discuss the matter further, feel free to send us an email or even a message on Facebook, and we'll be happy to discuss it further with you.
Daniel, very briefly.
No, it was just a minor point about the NPT. Go ahead, Lisa, take it away.
Oh, okay. We can do it. We can do that some other time. I'm sorry, Ikra, about that, but we're coming very much to the end of the time. And why don't you should stay in touch with Sean and Eskil from the Berlin office, and we will work out how to have an exchange on positive and negative peace. It's something that I care about a lot, but this is especially on nuclear disarmament because of the 75th anniversary of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I would like to thank you all. It's been really good. It's been and energizing also, thanks to Philip at the end. And I can assure you all that I am going to make good trouble. Lots of good trouble. I'm going to start in Italy, but then I'm going to branch out to the whole of Europe, thanks to the appeal that Reiner and the ITUC and Pax Christi and others have drafted, which is going to be published on the 9th of August. Tomorrow, however, on the 6th of August in the morning, I'm going to be in front of the Aviano US Air Force Base, where in Italy we still have nuclear weapons that are kept there with a ridiculous secrecy of don't confirm and don't deny, but we all know that they're there. So we're going to be there. I'm sure many of you are also going to be in other significant places. Here we all are. We're going to work towards no more Hiroshimas, no more Nagasakis, and we're all in this together. Thanks to Nihon Hidankyo and to Masako-san and all our Hibakusha friends who have given us the insight, as it were, as to why this should be our struggle alongside them. Thank you all very much, and I hope to be in. Owen, do you want to say something? Oh no, okay. Okay then, thank you all very much, and to be in touch again soon. Bye.